peace, mercy and blessings of God be upon you in August 1945. And in the glory of what the world was celebrating at the end of World War II. The US Navy discovered a strange discovery. In the Pacific Ocean, near the island of Honshu, the largest island in Japan, there were 2 destroyers belonging to the US Navy carrying out reconnaissance operations. During the operation, the American soldiers discovered a submarine belonging to the Japanese fleet. What made this submarine strange was its huge size and different design. The submarine was 60% larger than the largest US submarine at that time. Its length was about 122 meters, and its width was about 12 meters. Away from these huge dimensions, which left the American soldiers in a state of amazement. The design of the submarine itself was extremely strange. The submarine had a giant 35-meter long and 3-meter wide tank. It was designed in such a way that it was completely isolated from the water. This story confused everyone at the time, to the extent that some people imagined that the Japanese army was using it to transport goods. But the next day, after discovering another submarine similar to the first submarine, the American Navy soldiers were on duty to discover a secret weapon that was capable of breaking the result of the war head-on. Welcome, I am Yosef. But before we start, if you are new to the channel, do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell to be notified of our latest videos. At 8 a.m. on December 7, 1941, the Japanese Army planes carried out an attack on the Pearl Harbor port near Honolulu, which is located in Hawaii. Hundreds of Japanese planes attacked the port and caused heavy losses to the American Army. The Japanese planes destroyed about 20 pieces of US warship, in addition to more than 300 planes, and human losses exceeded 2,400 soldiers and civilians. Then the US President Franklin Roosevelt asked the US Congress to allow him to declare war on the Japanese Empire. The difference here is that the attack on the Pearl Harbor port was completely the opposite. Before the attack, Japan was carrying out large-scale campaigns in Asia. And as Japan's influence increased and threatened the interests of the United States in Asia, America decided to declare war as soon as possible. For this reason, Admiral Yamamoto thought of a way to keep Japan away from the war with the United States of America. His plan was to attack the Pearl Harbor and destroy the largest number of US naval forces in one blow. Yamamoto hoped that America would sit with Japan on the negotiating table, or at least keep the American fleet away from war in the Pacific for 6 months. But what happened was exactly the opposite. The United States of America declared war on Japan after only 1 day of attack. At that time, Admiral Yamamoto began to look for an alternative plan. He thought that if Japan waited for the American attack on its land and tried to find ways to block this attack, the Japanese army could be defeated. His plan this time was to invade the coast of America and attack the American cities. The submarine-carrying aircraft, the A-400, was the focus of the main plan. Almost a month after the attack, there was a new mission for the Japanese engineers. In short, they were designing a submarine with very special capabilities. The first of these capabilities would be to carry warplanes and the ability to launch them from the submarine itself. The submarine must also be able to travel thousands of kilometers without the need to refill the fuel. It was decided that they would build a fleet of 18 submarines, each of which was capable of carrying 3 warplanes. Indeed, in March 1943, the Japanese engineers succeeded in designing the submarine and the manufacturing process began. During the period before the submarine was manufactured, Japan was in an enviable position. The loss of the Japanese fleet in the Battle of Midway in June 1942 destroyed the morale of the Japanese soldiers. In addition, Japan's resources were very little at the time, and every second spent on Japan without development in the construction of the submarine was a sign of defeat. The shortage of resources during this manufacturing process forced the Japanese army to modify the plan. and decided to reduce the number of submarines required to be manufactured from 18 to 11, but after that, the resources decreased more and forced the commander to issue orders to manufacture only 5 submarines. In the end, despite all the difficulties, the first submarine was completed on December 30, 1943. This giant submarine was really an exceptional weapon with extraordinary capabilities. It was able to revolve around the globe once and a half before it needed to refill the fuel tank again. It had a giant tank that we talked about at the beginning of the episode, completely isolated from the water to keep the planes themselves. This is not the defense means it was equipped with, which made it one of the most powerful warships at the time, with the existence of 8 torpedoes to launch torpedoes in the front of the submarine. The submarine was ready to respond to any attack from another submarine. As for the surface of the submarine, it contained an arsenal of weapons in the sense of the word. On the surface of the submarine, there was a giant cannon that had great power. This cannon was able to fire from 6,000 to 10,000 rounds in a single minute. This is not that it was able to move in all directions. The surface contained 3 Type 96 cannons, which had 3 nozzles to launch anti-aircraft missiles, in addition to a single nozzle, which is located at the top of the submarine's cockpit, carry out the tasks required. But unfortunately, Japan did not make a single secret weapon, and its impact on the war was as if it did not exist. The Japanese submarine was doomed to fail for many reasons. Reasons related to the submarine itself and other reasons related to the war. Yamamoto's plan was based on secrecy and the element of surprise. For this reason, the workers on the submarine had to make the best use of the time the submarine had on the surface. Every second the submarine was turned off on the surface of the water, the whole plan was exposed to the risk of discovery. For this reason, the work of the time was very dangerous, and every second was effective. The only goal of every submarine team is that as soon as the submarine turns off on the surface, the planes take off as fast as possible. For this reason, the workers heated the oil for the engines of the planes in special places outside the plane before the submarine itself turned off on the surface, to shorten the time of heating the oil after starting the engines. And because the submarine, as soon as it turns off, will be tight, the second the submarine will be on the surface, the first plane will come out of the warehouse, and then the engineers will install the wings and install the turrets that will help it land, and at the same time, the oil that has been preheated will be poured into the engine of the plane to be turned on. And after that, the airlift will be turned on, through which the plane will gain the necessary thrust for taking off. And after taking off, the second plane is prepared for the same operation. And then the third plane. And then the submarine returns to the water waiting for the planes to return again. This whole process was supposed to take 30 minutes. But the big problem that appeared during the experimental operation of the submarine is that the workers took more time than that. And the most time they were able to carry out the takeoff process was 45 minutes. At that time, the Japanese army leaders were considered a big problem. Japan, in these circumstances, had already started to lose the war, and any mistake would cost them an early and sudden loss. The Japanese submarines that were being manufactured at that time were only 3 submarines, and they had orders to blow up the Panama Canal in an attempt to delay the American fleet and cut off their way to the Pacific Ocean. However, this operation was cancelled in June 1945 because the Americans were indeed crossing the canal. And after the cancellation of the first mission, the submarines had a new mission, which was to destroy the American naval forces located on the island of Ulysses, Morgana. But before the arrival of the submarines to the island in 3 days, the United States of America bombed Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the Japanese Empire declared surrender, which ended the mission of the submarines. After 2 weeks of Japan's declaration of surrender, the US naval forces discovered the submarines and the entire Japanese plan. And after the Americans tested these submarines to know the artificial technology in them, and to benefit from any of them, the Japanese secret weaponry ended up being destroyed on the coast of the United States of Ohio. That's it. Who made it this far? All who made it, you are the best people. Give us a like before you leave, so we know how many of you made it to the end. And don't forget, if you have a suggestion for an episode, write them in the comments. Most of the episodes we make now are taken from your comments. Peace.